If there is one thing that's frustrating when entering a new card game, it's losing to reactive cards you didn't know existed. In Flesh and Blood, most heroes play a face-up game. The attack you see is the attack that's coming. But there's one hero, a natural predator of new players, who uses hidden information to quickly spiral games out of control. Welcome to Magic Omens. I'm Hroe, and today I will prepare you to face Dorinthea, anticipate her moves, and defeat her. Dorinthea is a warrior and relies on weapon attacks of her sword Dawnblade. Her ability allows Dawnblade to attack a second time if it hits, provided she has an action point to do so. If Dawnblade draws blood twice in the same turn, it grows in power. To help achieve this, Dorinthea's deck consists largely of non-attack actions and attack reactions that increase power of weapon attacks, give go again or add on-hit effects. To prevent this, the opponent requires defense reactions, armor, and most importantly, knowledge of Dorinthea's cards and plays. Dawnblade Dorinthea is an aggressive deck. The more cards it has available, the more options there are to slip through the blocks. With plenty of armor on her side, she has no problem sacrificing health to set up massive turns. Her overall game plan can be divided into two phases. In the first phase, Dorinthea is playing from hand to hand, taking off turns here and there to set up bigger turns via Arsenal, but also conserving some key cards through pitching. The goal of this early and mid-game pressure is to burn as many opposing defense reactions and armor pieces as possible. In the second phase, once defensive resources are depleted, a few remaining power cards should be enough to seal the game or lead to the opponent's fatigue. Dorinthea's biggest power plays are Steelblade Supremacy turns. They are where she wants to use her Courage of Bladehold and her Faction Bolter's abilities, as those pieces of equipment free up resources in hand. In Blitz format, where health itself is more closely tied to tempo, she also makes good use of Ironsong Determination, pushing serious damage and securing a counter. She has a range of other ways to pressure cards from hand when her best tools aren't available, and add fuel to the fire when they are, so we'll take a closer look at them. Non-attack actions in the deck are rather similar. They give the next weapon attack some power, go again, or both. Warrior's Valor Red adds 3 power and on-hit go again at the cost of 1 resource. With a Bull card, it threatens 9 damage and a counter if Dawnblade is not blocked, a frighteningly efficient turn. Spoils of War exist only in red, grant 2 power and unconditional go again, which is actually quite beneficial due to some interactions we'll go over later. Hit and Run is unconditional go again and a power buff in big turns where it can be saved for the second attack. Sharpened Steel Red is a simple buff of 3 power for 0 cost. Deck cards such as Dauntless and Plowthrough can be used to counter specific decks or defensive strategies. Finally, the deck may run some potions to help set up bigger turns. Attack reactions are how Dorinthea gets her attacks to stick. Most of them have Reprise attached, meaning there is an extra effect if the opponent blocked with a card from hand. Ironsong Response Red adds 3 damage at no cost, provided the Reprise is active. Red Stroke of Foresight and Out for Blood are 3 damage for 1 resource, regardless of how the opponent blocks, and they have helpful effects with Reprise. Rout and Overpower are the big hitters with heavy costs. They add the much needed power density to cards in hand, and Rout is a great finisher with its Reprise effect removing the strongest blocking card. Glint the Quicksilver and Twinning Blade provide 2 things Dawnblade needs for another swing. Glint gives go again and replaces itself with Reprise active, while Twinning Blade is just Dorinthea's ability on a card. Biggest threat in the deck is Stinging Steelblade. Without Reprise, it's measly 1 resource for 1 power. But with Reprise, it tutors any attack reaction, making it the perfect toolbox card, grabbing just what the situation requires. One last thing of note is the sole attack action Dorinthea runs. Nourishing Emptiness is free real estate, a 6 power dominate that is sure to chip some armor or force a defense reaction. Otherwise, the aggressive deck gets another card in hand to play with. Highlighted are the cards you should try to keep track of. Are there any in the graveyard or pitch? If yes, how many? Knowing what threats are gone helps you play around the ones still remaining. Now that we know the cards, let's examine a few patterns of play you'll notice when facing Dorinthea players. First up, Dawnblade for 3, pitching a blue with 1 or more cards in hand. You never ever block this from hand for exactly 3. Stinging Steelblade completely blows you out, triggering its Reprise and that of Glint the Quicksilver. Glint in hand plus any attack reaction also works. If you have a defense reaction in arsenal, you have a chance to punish them instead, by not blocking, having them glint with no reprise, and then shutting the door on them or forcing another attack reaction without reprise, heavily reducing the efficiency of Dorinthea's hand. Alternatively, they don't react, you don't react, and they're an inexperienced Dorinthea and break bolters on hit. If bolters are broken on any turn that doesn't have Steelblade Supremacy, your life is much easier, so just overblock the second attack to prevent the counter. If your hand is full of bad 3-block cards that don't make for much of a turn, overblock for 6 or 9, depending on the number of cards in their hand, spend Singing Steelblades, and so on. If you have a defense reaction in arsenal and one in hand, you can spend and replace the one in arsenal, but do note that there is value in pitching the one in hand for late game. Generally, the naked Dawnblade for 3 presents little threat and often shouldn't be blocked. Attack reactions are inefficient cards when they have no reprise, so why help the opponent? Warrior's Valor Red, pitch blue, into Dawnblade for 6 is scary. If you have a defense reaction, blocking 6 and reacting to 10 serves to stop a turn dead most of the time. But if your hand blocks poorly or there is no defense reactions, you might want to let the first hit through and focus on overblocking the second swing. This all varies with the number of cards in Dorinthea's hand. With one card, the highest damage reaction that will still allow Dawnblade its second swing is Ironsong Response Red, so overblock for 9 on the first swing works. With 2 or more cards, things become unclear, but if you let the first swing hit, then potentially pitching another card for Braveforge Bracers can give you helpful information to prevent the Dawnblade counter. Spoils of War pitch blue into Dawnblade for 5 is at a first glance similar to the Warrior's Valor example, but the unconditional Gogan makes a large difference. Besides having to worry about all the things mentioned in that example, there is an added threat of cards that would come after a successfully blocked Dawnblade. The least worrying option is then playing out a potion as setup for future turns. If it's Nourishing Emptiness instead, we got a problem that has to be played around by not simply throwing armor or arsenal defense reactions at the sword. Another possibility is they have a Twinning Blade, to simply go around the box for another swing of Dawnblade. All of these examples also apply to Hit and Run, where the threat of Nourishing Emptiness is relevant with only one card in Dorinthea's hand. Supremacy pitch blue into Dawnblade for 5 has no go again on its own, but any Dorinthea player practiced with the hero will save bolters for turns like this, and there's always the threat of glint. If you run Unmovable, packing the first one you see into Arsenal and saving it for Supremacy swings is a solid approach. If you trade 1 for 1 with Unmovables and Supremacies, the game is won. If you have no defense reactions present, overblock heavily for 9 or 12. Check resources in hand to see if they can afford a rout or overpower. Hopefully you have the armor to not get blown out with glint plus twinning, but there is no perfect approach. Supremacy not only makes the Dawnblade attacks disgustingly efficient, it also secures Arsenal for 5-card hand next turn if attacks hit at any point. Dorinthea's most powerful setup is a combination of previous examples, where they break Courage of Bladehold, play Steelblade Supremacy, then Spoils of War, and swing Dawnblade with Twinning Blade ready in hand. The odds you have a hand that can block a turn like that properly, even with armor, are bad. Their hand is probably 2 cards as well, because they saved armor to block before a turn like this, so try to cut your losses and prevent at least the third swing from coming through. Alright, worst came to worst. Dawnblade got a counter. What now? It needs 1 hit per turn to keep it, so the focus becomes stopping the first hit. This gets harder as the usual breakpoints are moved up by 1. If you're not sure what to do, throwing the entire hand into block is a working approach. It risks fatigue at some later stage and shouldn't be done carelessly when threat of unconditional Gogan with Twinning Blade is present. Ironsong Determination and 2 block cards popping up in hand can reduce the effectiveness of this strategy, but the longer that counter is on the board, the more free value Dorinthea has, so get rid of it as soon as possible. Regardless of what the initial swing is, respect Rout when health gets low. Dorinthea usually runs 1 in Blitz and 1 or 2 in Classic Constructed, to use as a finishing move. Blocking 3 from hand and then stopping attack reactions with an Unmovable from Arsenal can get completely blown out by Rout once its reprise is on. It's not a difficult card to play around, because if it doesn't kill you, it puts a card back into your hand to strike back, but it can lead to frustrating losses if forgotten about. The problem often is that we are faced with a blocking situation that will seriously weaken our next turn even if we stop almost everything. But the bright side is that we have gotten rid of a couple power cards. And this is the bright side you should look at. If you find yourself on the back foot, but manage to weather the storm by trading away your bad cards for Dorinthea's power cards without dying, you are likely to win, as there will be more and more naked Dawnblades for 3, with threats easy to count in the graveyard. That said, the game cannot be won by only blocking. If Dorinthea is given free reign to set up her hands, she'll eventually go around any defenses you can set up. Offensive pressure is required, and sometimes it's even worth letting Dawnblade get a counter, to hit back hard and force multiple cards out of her hand, making the next block much easier. In fact, this is the strategy some aggro decks employ, such as Briar and Chain. We're not here to make you change your hero though, so let's briefly go over the advice in this video once more. Read and remember attack reactions in popular Dorinthea deck lists. Once you know the 8 or so options she has, blocking can be reduced to math, preparing for the worst case scenario. If your deck is not aggressive enough to raise Dorinthea, only hubris can make you think winning without defense reactions is possible. Include some in your sideboard, or main a few in Blitz. Blocking with armor, a defense reaction from Arsenal, or not blocking at all, makes Dorinthea lose access to several powerful abilities on her cards. It's good practice to announce you're playing your defense reaction after an attack reaction has resolved without reprise, to avoid angle shooting. Drawing a defense reaction is not a reason to immediately block with it from hand. Blocking with other cards and committing the reaction to Arsenal will allow you a really efficient block down the line and the opportunity to strike back. Don't throw your armor and defense reactions at any old attack. There are different priority levels to threats. Don't get cocky and end up facing a Supremacy turn or Nourishing Emptiness without a defense reaction in Arsenal. Overblock when necessary. Rolling over and dying is no way to play the game. Recognize when it's safe to not block because of Dorinthea's weak hand and use the opportunity to apply as much pressure as you can. With all this focus on blocking, don't forget that 1 health is as good as 0 against Dorinthea if your hero relies on weapon attacks. Staying on 2 or 3 health gives you a healthy buffer, but you can also avoid weapon attacks until you see a Sigil of Solace to bring you out of the deadly range. This concludes the video. I hope you found the advice helpful. There are a lot of minute details that could be discussed at length, but Flesh and Blood is a game where experience trumps everything else. Go out and play against your local Dorinthea players again and again and lose as many times as you have to learn all the tricks she has up her sleeve. This is the most important piece of advice I have today. Losses will teach you far more than 10 minutes on YouTube ever can. Until next time.